acá del arquitecto Pablo Frajario del Taller Nación y todos sus equipos docentes. Así que bueno, bienvenidos a la casa de todos y bienvenido al arquitecto Gianotten.
Bueno, en principio quiero ponerlos un poco en contexto para que puedan entender un poco cómo se dio esta charla, y lo primero es agradecer a la facultad que también puso a disposición, bueno, en realidad lo que debiéramos poder capitalizar todo seguido, que son todos estos lugares colectivos que tenemos que nos permiten juntarnos. Así que en primer lugar, gracias a la facultad. Después también les quiero agradecer mucho a muchos colegas titulares y a los estudiantes de las otras cátedras que podemos darle un marco a estas cuestiones y poder entre todos participar de estas instancias colectivas. Hay varias cátedras que han aportado su apoyo para venir acá y juntarnos todos. Es siempre una de las cosas más interesantes, es que podamos volvernos a juntar en torno a la discusión disciplinar. Y para ser breve, contarles que en el taller que pensamos como el territorio nacional, el año pasado estudiamos una región de las 6 regiones en las que dividimos el país, que es la Pampa. La Pampa como dispositivo productivo de insumos de alimentación. Y en ese estudio dimos con que OMA había realizado un trabajo notable que terminó en una exposición en el Guggenheim de New York acerca de lo que ellos llamaron Countryside the Future, o sea, una reflexión acerca de las pampas del mundo. Y en ese marco, yo conocí a David en el 2007 en México en un seminario y nos contactamos con él. Y la verdad que muy amablemente se dispuso a ser parte de un intercambio con el taller. Tuvimos una primera charla que él dio a mediados del año pasado, y sobre fin de año un par de estudiantes, una es Ana, que está aquí a la izquierda, y Nacho, que anda por ahí, pidieron tener como una revancha con David. Quisieron hablar con él, quisieron esta vez contarles ellos su proyecto sobre Pampa. Y David nuevamente accedió a principios de este año a tener ese intercambio. Y de ese intercambio surgió la posibilidad que él dijo hace unos meses: yo puedo estar por alrededor del 3-4 de octubre, puedo pasar por Buenos Aires. Así que en ese ida y vuelta es que hoy David está aquí, y nos pareció que era valioso poner en común la posibilidad de tenerlo a él, que representa una de las oficinas que incidió en gran medida en buena parte de la reflexión disciplinar en todo el mundo en los últimos 30 años, 40 años, si quieren, a partir de la figura de Rem Koolhaas, el socio principal o más conocido, del cual David es uno de los asociados del estudio. Así que, habiendo puesto en conocimiento, me parece que está la oportunidad de poder como interactuar con esta otra mirada sobre el fenómeno disciplinar a escala. Me parece que nos tiene que hacer como permitir pensar un poco nuestro rol y el rol de la disciplina, sobre todo en el marco de las posibilidades que tenemos nosotros de operar en nuestro territorio. Así que agradecerle a David. Ana ahora les va a hacer una breve descripción de la bio y nos quedamos con la charla, y en todo caso después habrá preguntas o lo que surja. Así que, Ana.
No. David Gianotten es el arquitecto y socio director de Office for Metropolitan Architecture, OMA. Supervisa la gestión organizativa y financiera general, la estrategia comercial y el crecimiento de OMA en todos los mercados, además de su propia cartera arquitectónica. Actualmente, David desarrolla y lidera el diseño y la construcción de proyectos en diferentes regiones, incluido el Bages Quartier de Ámsterdam, la reconversión de un gran complejo penitenciario de la década del 60 en un nuevo vecindario con 1.350 departamentos, y BDMA, la transformación de un sitio no utilizado con patrimonio industrial en Eindhoven, Países Bajos, en un centro urbano de uso mixto. También es responsable del diseño y realización del Taipei Performing Arts Center en Taiwán 2022, Potato Head Studios, un resort en Bali, Western Australian Museum Bula Bardip en Perth, Prince Plaza en Shenzhen, White Cube en Lusanga y la sede de la Bolsa de Valores de Shenzhen. David se unió a OMA en 2008, inauguró la oficina de OMA en Hong Kong en 2009 y se convirtió en socio en 2010. Lideró la cartera de OMA en la región de Asia-Pacífico durante 7 años. Es catedrático de Arquitectura Transformacional en la Universidad Tecnológica de Eindhoven. Desde 2016 es profesor del Departamento de Ingeniería y Diseño Urbano Arquitectónico de la escuela, donde es egresado de Arquitectura e Ingeniería Arquitectónica. David también es miembro del directorio de la Escuela de Verano de Honores de Asia en los Países Bajos. Muchas gracias, David, por estar aquí con nosotros hoy.
Thank you. So I work for OMA, not to be confused with OMA, because OMA in our language means grandmother. So it's really OMA. But it's a common mistake all around the world that we are called grandmother, which in a way is quite funny.
Bueno, como mencionaba antes, David es arquitecto y socio director de OMA, que no debe ser confundido con OMA, que significa abuela en su idioma.
So OMA has projects all around the world, and what we really try to do as an office is to work in every different typology. So we are not an office that is specialized in airports or specialized in stadiums or specialized in housing, but we try to do all the different things in different locations, because we really think it's very important to know the cultures we're working with, and while we're working somewhere we always look for local collaborators and collaborate with people from the place to get the maximum end result. We have offices all around the world, one in New York, our headquarters in Rotterdam, where I'm stationed, in Hong Kong, in Perth, Australia, and also in the Middle East and in Beijing.
Bueno, OMA es una oficina que trabaja con tipologías y culturas muy diversas y tienen oficinas a lo largo de todo el mundo, en Nueva York, Rotterdam, Hong Kong, Australia y Asia.
So what for us is very important is that we do projects only from the beginning till the end. We never do a project just to do a sketch and then a local collaborator takes over till the end. Because we really believe that the result needs to be coming from a collaboration. So we are... It's nice. It's as if I'm in a nightclub presenting. It doesn't happen often to me. So also from the beginning to the end, right? So for us that's a very important thing. We are at the moment a partnership of 8 partners of different generations. So for example, Rem Koolhaas and myself are working globally. Of course Rem works a little bit less, but almost being 80 years old. But the two of us work in a global context, so we have projects all around the world. And our other partners work in regions in the Americas, Europe and the Middle East, and in Asia and Australia.
Cada socio trabaja en una región del mundo y para ellos es muy importante participar y estar en la gestión y organización de un proyecto desde el principio hasta el final, en este proceso colaborativo con socios de distintas generaciones.
So this is me, but you already heard about me, so the next slide. One of the key things is that architecture is actually a very complex profession. And a lot of people, especially clients, don't really realize that they're very often asking us very difficult things. Because the first thing they say to us very often is, we want the greatest building in the world. It needs to be iconic and great. At the same time they say, I want it tomorrow and not in 4 years from now. So you need to be very fast. And by the way, I have very little money. So it also needs to be quite cheap. If you cross over all these things together, you get to the impossible utopia, as we call it in the office. And that is what we strive for in every project, which is obviously impossible, but we really try to do it. This shows you that kind of architecture is a profession of a lot of thinking, a lot of collaboration, and also of a lot of explaining and education. It's not purely aesthetical design. You really need to be a mediator in a process that is extremely complex and very often with about 100 people.
La arquitectura es una profesión muy compleja. Los clientes a menudo vienen con pedidos de utopías imposibles, el bueno, bonito y barato que conocemos acá, y nos encontramos frente al gran desafío de pensar, colaborar, explicar y mediar con los clientes.
So, with OMA we have our architecture office, and we are real. We do, we act, we build, we change. We have manifestation in the shape of a building, and we are reactive based on client's brief. But because of the complexity of our profession, we believe that research and proactive work is extremely important to be able to determine the discourse of our profession. And therefore we have our mirror image called AMO, with which we are virtual. We think, we reflect. It's not necessarily about building. We observe, we manifest and it is proactive. So we do it ourselves. We initiate with the architecture profession that debate. From OMA, 50% of our profits go directly to AMO. So we don't spend it as dividends, but we really spend it in research and thinking about our profession. So as I said, with OMA we do. For example, the Seattle Library in America, the CCTV headquarters in Beijing, one of the biggest buildings we ever done, 1 million square meters. I have had the honor to build this. And also the Fondazione Prada in Milan, which is a project that is still ongoing because it's a living project that constantly is extending based on the ideas of Moshe Prada.
En OMA hacemos, actuamos y somos reactivos frente a los pedidos de los clientes. El 50% de nuestras ganancias son destinadas a AMO, nuestro espejo. Investigamos, somos proactivos, reflexionamos y no necesariamente construimos edificios.
So with OMA we mainly think. So for example, in another way, all their fashion shows, all their books, all their lookbooks, all their parfum bottles, and we really work with them on every single level of the branding of the company. We also realized a study which is called the Energy Grid for Europe, to take Europe completely into sustainable energy. And this grid is a vision that was for 2030. It was commissioned by the European Union. And the idea is that it is now, because of the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis, becomes faster, and that we're actually finished with this grid in 2025. And this is already, as Pablo, my good friend, already mentioned to you, our exhibition in the Guggenheim of Frank Lloyd Wright about the countryside, where we study, now more than 50% of the people live in cities, what the role of the countryside actually now is to humanity, which is actually changing a lot and becomes much more productive again because it needs to provide to the city.
Bien, entonces en AMO, como mencionaba antes, nosotros pensamos, trabajamos con Prada en todo el nivel, todos los niveles del branding de la compañía, y también tenemos un proyecto para abastecer de energía sustentable a toda Europa para el 2025.
So I will show to you tonight 3 projects. One is in my own culture, the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. One is in Bali, in Indonesia, which is about tourism and the changing world of tourism. And the third one will be the Taipei Performing Arts Center in Taipei, which is really about accommodating low and high culture in the same place. So our first project is a very important project in the city of Amsterdam. The city of Amsterdam, most people know it as a channel city that is really completely water. Everything that is the big streams is here water. And the city is completely completed because it's lying in a marsh, so we can't extend it anymore. However, in that red circle, there is a big prison, which was built in the 1960s. And we have a different philosophy about prisons these days. They shouldn't be inside of the city anymore. They should be outside. So that place came up for transformation. So a big part in the city suddenly comes available to create a new quarter in the city. A very complex project because we had to transform a place where nobody could go, or I hope that nobody wanted to go there, namely a prison, into a new idea for housing towards the future. So a place where we hope that everybody goes to live or to at least experience it.
Bien, el primer proyecto que voy a contar hoy está ubicado en Ámsterdam. Ámsterdam es una ciudad que está completamente rodeada por agua y que su crecimiento está muy limitado en ese sentido. En el medio de la ciudad encontramos un lote de propiedad del gobierno que desde la década del 60 era una prisión. Y actualmente tenemos una filosofía distinta acerca de las prisiones, creemos que tienen que estar fuera de la ciudad. Entonces nos encontramos con un gran espacio vacío disponible y aprovechamos la oportunidad y asumimos el desafío de construir un lugar donde nadie quería ir en un conjunto de viviendas y un espacio público para la ciudad.
So I show you first a few pictures. I will not say too much about it, about how the prison actually is and what we are going to do with the transformation. So this is the prison complex. It was a tower prison, 6 towers, with a main quarter where people came in, built in 60s architecture, white concrete, very prominent at the entrance of Amsterdam. And here you see a picture in the 60s when it was just built. And one of the things that is, for example, very important to say, at that point there were no bars, because they believed that even prisoners had rights. This was the main building where you would enter and then of course go into the prison system. And here you see a picture of a little bit later, and for the people that have an eye for detail, you see there are bars in front of the window here. Because in the first 5 years, about 20 criminals thought, no bars, that's a chance. And they went out. So the social idea behind it was not really understood by the criminals. And this was the architect that actually thought of that social idea, which is a quite interesting woman, because she was one of the first Dutch lady architects that created kind of these big type of social projects in the 60s, and she became really important in our architectural portfolio in the Netherlands for that social thinking. So she thought the prison is a community. It's an open community where you have the cells, and in between the cells there's an area where prisoners can relax. They have their own kitchen, they can make their own food. And only at 9 o'clock in the evening the cell doors will be closed, and in the morning at 7 o'clock they will open again. There was also a church, which in the beginning was a Christian church, but later became a church for all religions, because you can imagine that criminals have different beliefs as well. So here you see a picture of how it was inside, and that meant kind of that these prisoners were chit-chatting in that area they had. They were playing ping pong and cooking. And this is the inside of the cell, which was also quite okay. You had a bed, it was a one-person cell, you had your own little pantry, your own bathroom, and even later your own TV. To service this, it was very important to connect all these towers together, which is also an important part of the architecture, because there's a huge street in the middle, which they call the Kalverstraat, which is the biggest shopping street in Amsterdam, where all the prisoners would come together and would actually sell each other all kinds of things. And this is that street, named like this big shopping street. Underneath that, there was all the surfaces and piping that would connect everything together. I think you should not translate this all.
Okay. Bueno, podíamos ver en las primeras imágenes la arquitectura prominente de los 60, donde no había rejas porque se consideraba tenía en cuenta los derechos de los prisioneros, hasta que, bueno, 20 criminales escaparon, pero había una fuerte voluntad social inicial en la arquitecta que diseñó esta prisión, que se organiza en un conjunto de celdas en torno a un patio central común, donde también hay una iglesia, y dentro de la prisión tenían una calle común donde funcionaba una especie de feria donde podían intercambiar bienes.
So the ambitions of the government, which is the national government, was to change this place from a prison to the most sustainable housing area in the Netherlands that should be completely self-sufficient. So it needed to be a place for all. Diversity was important. It needed to be daring and sustainable, and it also should be shown to the inhabitants of the city. There should be a full mobility transformation. Now in the city of Amsterdam, it's not allowed anymore to go in with gasoline cars. You need an electric car to get in, or a bicycle. It needs to be healthy urban living, and it also needs to be monitored what actually sustainable and healthy urban living does for the inhabitants. So the University of Amsterdam is working with us to also monitor what we're doing. It needed to expand the city, which was tucked into this marsh area. It needed to bring new housing typologies. And it needed to be competitive on international level. So it also needed to attract attention and be an exemplar project for the future. So from a prison to the most sustainable neighborhood of the future, at least for the Netherlands. So we looked at it in a very simplistic way, namely as kind of a metabolism of people. The city is also a metabolism. Things go in and things come out, and you need to, of course, feed the system, and you also need to work with what comes out and reuse that to bring it back into the system. We looked at that on levels of the city, of the region, and of the location itself, and even on the building with all its context. So here you see we looked at the metropolitan area, the district, the site, and the building. And on all levels we wanted to make sure that everything that goes in and comes out is also reused and circular in that system. So we wrote down all kinds of ambitions that we wanted to incorporate in the master planning, and then later on also in the building. I will not name them all because that is not so important. But the most important thing we said is that people that come and live here should be able to live 2 years longer than when they live somewhere else in the city. That sounds very silly, but because we need to monitor the effect of this, and the university is helping us with it, you really need to have a goal that you can account for and monitor during the process that goes from now till in 40 years.
Las ambiciones por parte del gobierno para este proyecto era que sea autosuficiente, diverso, sustentable, genere una transformación en la movilidad, preservando los autos eléctricos y el uso de bicicletas, también que genere un ambiente sano y que considere su propio crecimiento en el tiempo, que sea competitivo a nivel internacional y también atractivo. La prisión entonces se convierte en un espacio resiliente para la ciudad, algo que ellos plantean como metabolismo urbano, y en un sistema de tripartito de distrito, emplazamiento y edificio, analizan cómo funciona esa economía circular. Se plantean el desafío también de que las personas que vivan en este lugar vivan 2 años más que si viviesen en otra parte de la ciudad.
So the concept of the whole project is relatively simple, and we explain it in a few diagrams. So the most important thing is that everybody knows that prison because it's right at the entry point, both for the train and for the car into Amsterdam city, which is a north-south direction. and therefore that is the mental memory. It's at the entrance of the city, which is this north-south connection to the rest of the country. Yet, in Amsterdam, something is really happening in an important scale. On the left-hand side, on the south, we're building a new downtown, and on the right-hand side, you see that we are creating new islands inside of the water. Actually, the whole of the Netherlands is an island built by ourselves, and we built a new science park there, a new big university, you could say, with all kinds of innovative companies attached to it. So suddenly the east-west direction in the city also becomes very important. And that is also exactly going over the site where we are. So that means that this position of a prison where nobody could go is actually at the crossroads of the new axes in the city. And next to that, it's also the area where the new green corridor of the city is created from the Amstel River all the way to the IJ River, and a new ecology zone in the city is introduced. So not a few stepping parks, but really a real green corridor through, which is next to our site.
Bien, el concepto que estructura este edificio, que se encuentra en el encuentro de los ejes norte, sur y este, oeste de la ciudad, además se encuentra en una posición privilegiada por ser la entrada del tren, en tren y en auto a Ámsterdam. Entonces se posiciona en este encuentro de ejes, donde también se introduce un gran corredor verde que atraviesa la ciudad.
So if we look at how the prison was, we are going to transform it in steps. So this is the site in diagram, where you see the main building, the prison towers, and in the front a little village where all the guard keepers lived. So firstly, we take away 3 of the towers, and we keep 3 of them to transform into a new place. Why these 3? Because I just explained the north-south axis is important. So the moment you come into the city, you see immediately one of the towers. Also when you come from the city and go out, you see one of the towers. And when you go from east to west, you see that tower that is in the middle. Then we create 4 clusters around these towers and around the original village. So we have all the different possibilities and directions. The east-west axis comes into play. We have the central carré, which is the entrance building, creating a new quarter. We have a learning cluster on the beginning, and then at the top, the cluster moves towards and in the angle of the city. And then we connect it with a new Kalverstraat, which is not covered anymore, but is exactly at the same location as the service corridor of the project was, where now there's the main archery only for pedestrians and for bicycles. And then we create a lot of new building around these existing clusters, which are all made out of fully circular materials. And also all the materials that we first demolished are reused in these buildings, or at least 98% of these materials is reused and simply doesn't leave the site. Only 2% is discarded, which is of course asbestos and things that are unhealthy for people that you don't want to bring back into the system.
La transformación se realiza por pasos. El complejo consiste de una serie de torres con un barrio para los guardias. Dejan solamente 3 torres para preservar los ejes urbanos norte, sur y este-oeste que mencionábamos antes. El nuevo proyecto se estructura en 4 clústeres que generan sus propios ejes de orden interno en relación también a los ejes urbanos. Y en cada clúster se construyen edificios reutilizando todos los materiales de la demolición en un 98%.
So the proposal is now to build 135,000 square meters of new build, which is obviously in a city as Amsterdam of 600,000 citizens, quite a lot of new area. And as I already said, we reuse everything that was there before. For example, all the cell doors, all the concrete of the walls, all the concrete of the buildings, and even all the bars that were added later are reused into the proposal. So that also meant that we were not going to demolish the whole project with a big ball and just bang it down and then drive it off, but we really decomposed every single element, created a material bank where we could really state what is there, and then worked with the architects that are going to work on the proposal, including ourselves, who can reuse what in their new building. On top of that, we created a full green landscape that helps to have this corridor, this ecological corridor to go through the site and to have all the new ecosystem be complemented. So all the roofs, for example, harvest water and are fully green. And this is then an image of the master plan that we have submitted.
Bueno, el complejo tiene una superficie de 135.000 metros cuadrados. Es importante entender el privilegio que semejante espacio disponible representa para la ciudad de Ámsterdam. Todos los elementos que se sacaron del sitio fueron descompuestos y llevados a un banco de materiales donde se estudió con mucha precisión y rigurosidad cómo reutilizarlos en los nuevos edificios. Además, el proyecto propone un paisaje verde que se articula con el corredor mencionado anteriormente.
So here you see an image from the master plan as it is designed today. So first, what we call the learning districts, which has a school, and it opened this summer. And it is funny because my son just started high school and actually on this school, which is very nice. And it has an innovation center for young students and for people that are just from university to start their own businesses and to have their labs on site. So that's happening in the first district, which is now finished. Then the design district, which has the central carré and which has two large skyscrapers made out of wood, which is a full experiment in the Netherlands. The whole building is fully made out of wood. And then the central district with the existing tower with around it new housing and a school for very small children, and then 3 housing towers from social housing to high-end housing. Because in the Netherlands it is necessary in our culture to mix all the different type of people, so that's that diversity, into one district. Cannot be only high-end or cannot only be social housing. At least 30% need to be social housing, 40% in the middle, and the remaining 30% at the end, high-end part. So that is always completely mixed and is everywhere the same in the Netherlands. And then the last one, which is the Amstel district.
El complejo se organiza en 4 distritos. Por un lado, un distrito educativo, que también tiene centros de investigación e innovación. En segundo lugar, un distrito de diseño, en el que se encuentran 2 rascacielos completamente construidos con madera. El tercer distrito es el distrito central, donde además de vivienda social, donde se mezclan distintos niveles socioeconómicos, también hay una escuela para niños, y el último distrito es el distrito Amstel.
Marianne? And here you see some of the numbers where we will skip them. So the interesting thing is that we are working here with a combination of established architects like ourselves and architectural offices that just are established, for example, even offices that only started 2 years ago, so that we can learn from each other. The less experienced architects have a big building that they can build for the first time, and we can help them, and the young architects can obviously give us all kinds of new ideas and inspire us to renew our vision. So in total 11 architectural offices work together in the whole plan. We will quickly go through all the ones, but maybe you first translate about the architects.
Great. Bueno, este complejo es fruto de la colaboración y combinación de muchos arquitectos, un trabajo intergeneracional donde todos aprenden y se inspiran mutuamente.
So we first go through the learning cluster with the school, the high school, and the innovation center, and in the middle a park that is built on the foundations of this village where the guards lived. So it's very simple. It's a positive and a negative, a slab and an horizontal bar at the same side, punctured for light and for air, and then kind of added the green in the different positions of the buildings. And here you see an image of how the idea is about how that park and that green goes into the building.
El clúster de aprendizaje educativo se compone de una escuela y un centro de innovación más un parque. El edificio está compuesto por una barra que se perfora, permitiendo que el parque ingrese al edificio.
So the design cluster in the Carré building, there will be all kinds of ateliers and areas for established artists and also artists that are new, that can find their way. And the Design School of Amsterdam will give their classes. And then around it you have these two wooden buildings and the tower in the middle, the existing tower, which will be transformed to a green tower where all the elements of sustainability are displayed. So we have the existing building, we finish the carré with the wooden buildings, we create a culture heart and we integrate all the sustainability in a visible way so that people can really learn from this cluster. And here you see an image of how that cluster is renewed with an open ground floor with the two wooden buildings and the green tower that has on the top a wind turbine that has all kinds of innovative offices and companies inside, and that also has all the warm and cold exchange, because of course in the Netherlands we have to heat our homes for more than half of the year, which is happening in the ground of the Belma Bias. And here you see a section of that green tower. I will not explain it completely, but it has all the elements like harvesting the food here, growing the food here, transforming all the waste out of food into energy. It has co-maker spaces, as I just said, and people can go all the way to the top, which is that power nest that captures the wind and creates a lot of energy. So here's the existing situation. We first open up the ground floor and take a lot of things away that are not so nice anymore. We put the wooden buildings around it in an alignment of the carré. We open up the building to a central square, which you see here. And then around the central square we have all these co-maker spaces and design spaces to activate the space. And here the energy hubs inside. And here you see images of how it will look in the future with this full open ground floor. And here the center of the plaza. And here the church and the wooden buildings and the green tower.
El distrito de diseño consiste de ateliers para artistas y un edificio existente alrededor del cual se introducen edificios de madera, los que mencionábamos anteriormente. El edificio existente es intervenido para generar una planta baja abierta y atravesable. El clúster de diseño transforma la comida en energía y produce también energía eólica, todas medidas sustentables.
And here we see an image of one of these wooden buildings. It goes up to 14 stories. It has a section on the one hand, and you see the higher part next to it with all the types of housing inside in a kind of unit of the same size. And here you see how we create different typologies of housing inside. And this is all constructed out of wood that is grown in sustainable forest in Scandinavia, brought here, and then already outside being prefabricated and put together on the site in the high-rise.
Los edificios de madera contienen en su interior distintas tipologías. La madera proviene de bosques sustentables escandinavos y sus piezas fueron diseñadas con mucha precisión.
So the central cluster, the mainly housing district with all the different typologies of housing. So we keep one of the towers, we create 4 new towers in the cluster, which all have stepping volumes so that everybody has a good view and an outside space. And then we have the central square in the middle. And here you see how the different towers, all with an external grid, work together. Here from another angle, and here you look at a building that we have designed. It's a building simply out of 4 cubes that are stacked together in a curvy way. Which then create a building that has a lot of terraces at different levels for the citizens to use. And we program these terraces in a green way. We put solar cells there, and we also have internal courtyards connected to the green. And here you see how that grid works over all the 4 cubes, and then how that translates into the architecture of the building. And the other side.
El distrito central es esencialmente de viviendas, con una gran diversidad tipológica. Todas las torres que aparecen están posicionadas de tal manera que no se tapan entre ellas y trabajan en conjunto. Se superponen sus masas generando terrazas.
So and then the last cluster that is turned into the system of the city with also one of the existing towers in the middle. An area that is completely programmed with all outdoor spaces that is very green in the center around this axis of pedestrians. And here you see how that actually works together with the central cluster and the existing building. This is the existing building next to the new buildings, and you will see that the existing building, of course, is still that massive building, and all the other buildings are grid buildings that are much more friendly.
Bien, en el último distrito, el distrito Amstel, conserva una de las torres originales, alrededor de la cual se posicionan nuevos edificios, y en la planta baja genera un gran eje peatonal.
So the idea is that we create a place that is fully sustainable and a full green urban living area. So these are the sustainable goals that the University of Amsterdam will also measure over time, which is not only about LEED configurations, but it is really about new ideas about sustainability. So we are green and healthy. We encourage people to move. We are totally car-free, and it's of course a very natural and healthy space. We innovate and we are inclusive, not only by reusing all the materials, but completely mixing all kinds of facilities together so that it becomes a 24-hour area. We are fully circular. We are also sustainable, fully self-energy sufficient. The heat and cold storage is in the ground of the area, so no additional support needed. And all the local food is produced there and also reused in the organic waste composition helps to make the next batch of food. And of course, culture and design and innovation are very important elements for a city like this, or a part of a city like this, to function, because it needs to not only work with the future, but it also needs to work with people that think about the future. And then there's a lot of education also for the younger people, so that the next steps, this becomes more normal and neutral, and that this becomes the norm rather than an exception. And that is then the view of the master plan of how it will be, hopefully in about 6 years from now.
Bien, esta perspectiva final que podemos ver aérea es cómo se va a ver dentro de 6 años. El proyecto, que es absolutamente sustentable, es sano para las personas en cuanto a la movilidad libre de autos, es inclusivo, mezclando muchos usos y generando un ciclo de 24 horas de utilización constante, es circular en cuanto a la eficiencia energética y es cultural porque trabaja con personas que están pensando el futuro.
So the next project I want to show you is called the Potato Head Studios. It's in Bali in Indonesia. And it's a project a lot about local culture, because we collaborated with a local client who had an idea that his island was going to waste simply because all the tourists coming to Bali having a great holiday there, but not thinking about the environment of Bali at all. Leaving a lot of plastic, leaving kind of an environment that was completely not authentic anymore, and that was purely about consumption of the area. And he wanted to change that around. He wanted to make it authentic Bali again, and actually wanted to create a place that was zero waste and that had no impact, although it has 200 rooms for tourists on the area itself. It's in Seminyak, one of the most touristic places in Bali, so it is right in the heart of the damage, you could say. And it comprises of 3 different elements. A beach club, which we designed together with Andra Martin, one of the best designers of Indonesia itself. So collaboration. A very important part, and it's not only to consume, but it is also to learn about the local cooking. It's also about learning about art, and it's also about learning of the different religions of the island. Then a first hotel, which is a hotel that is called Kata Mama, which means mother says in the language there. And it is about educating tourists how to deal with the local environment, and the people that come here can actually help to harvest the things that we use in the project, especially the waste on the island. And here you see me. On the left hand side you see the client, which is Ronald Akili. He is 10 years younger than me, and he really had a vision to do it. And on the right hand side you see a chef that became part of the whole exercise to train people also to grow their food completely in this village and produce from that for the tourists, but also for the village itself. So it was also important that the citizens of the village started participating and would become part of the whole effort and could work here as well. So the site that we were able to get in between all the different resorts that are very wasteful was a forest and a piece of beach in which we created our project. We first looked at all the different typologies of resorts that were there, and what was very interesting is that they were all having a gate, that they were all dumping their waste directly on the other side of the gate into the surroundings, and that they would simply not look, and the tourists would also not look what their input actually was. Next to that, we looked at the festivals and the events, the cultural life of Bali, because we thought that if we would bring that into the village, which was completely open to society, that we would actually attract people from the local areas, but also would mix with the tourists coming from abroad. And so we designed a resort program, but in an equal part we created areas for cultural events and food and growing food and working with recycling of waste in the waste labs is part of that cultural events. So it became kind of a platform where all kinds of new things could actually happen.
El proyecto que voy a presentar ahora es Potato Head Studios, que se encuentra en Bali, en Indonesia, Y este proyecto trabaja con el turismo, que es la actividad principal de esa zona, que genera mucho residuo. Y plantea en este proyecto la posibilidad y el desafío de aprender de la cultura local. Consiste básicamente de 3 elementos, un club de playa y 2 hoteles, y uno de los objetivos principales es incorporar la participación de los habitantes en este proyecto. Del análisis inicial concluyen que la tipología predominante en la zona estaba muy vedada, era muy cerrada hacia afuera y estaba vedado el acceso para quienes no eran huéspedes. Entonces ellos plantean incorporar a la cultura local al proyecto y que se mezclen con los turistas, planteando iguales partes de cultura y programa propio del hotel.
So the first thing we changed is the balance that is in a normal resort, namely it's all about the guests and all about consumption, to a system where the guests were equal to the space that was given to the village and to the villagers, so that they would actually start working together. So instead of only investing in the people that come from far, we equally invested in the people that are from there. And here you also see in the first image of the project that we only used materials that were available in Bali, and actually most of these materials are reused from other projects that were not running anymore, or through pandemic you can imagine that many of the resorts that were actually very wasteful failed, which was lucky for us, and we took many of these materials into our project. So that we would simply not import any piece of material from outside of Bali. To do that, we also really looked at the vernacular of Indonesia and of their building, and this could only be done with local collaboration. So we worked with several universities together to really look at the different types of vernacular and how people used their houses and used their multifunctional buildings in an almost spiritual way. And you see that all of these elements are actually lifted up from the floor. That had 3 main reasons. One reason was that it would would avoid floods, and Indonesia is an island country. There's a lot of floods. It would also be safe from the animals that are crawling around, which are not so nice to have in your bedroom. And it helps with the circulation of air, and therefore it helps with the climate, and the positioning of mass would actually increase that. So these 3 elements we also used in the building because we wanted to avoid air conditioning as much as we could, even in a resort that would bring people from far away. We also looked at how the different elements of the traditional vernacular would follow up and how people from Indonesia actually use spaces and in which sequence they do that. And we used exactly the same vernacular in the position of functions in the resort. And then we looked at all these materials. For example, the building is made out of sand from Bali itself. So we looked at all kinds of beaches where we could actually harvest the sand. We looked at kind of what they would do when we would make them into concrete. And in the end we choose 2 beaches and mix that sand, which creates this beautiful reddish color of the project. And that we did with many different materials in the area. We used all kinds of elements of the local craftsmanship, of the local available materials, and we bound that all together in the project.
El proyecto altera el eje desde los huéspedes y de los hoteles y concentrado en el consumo hacia un escenario donde son iguales a quienes residen allí. Hay una fuerte intención de usar los materiales disponibles, los materiales locales y reutilizarlos. Un ejemplo es el uso de la arena de la playa, que después de un estudio profundo del comportamiento de este material se traslada al proyecto dotándolo de su característico color rojo. Es muy importante que para este proyecto no se importan materiales que vengan de afuera de Indonesia. La colaboración local con universidades también fue fundamental y hay un profundo estudio de lo vernacular para ser incorporado al proyecto, cómo los locales utilizan los espacios y cómo se comportan. Los edificios se encuentran elevados del suelo, en primer lugar porque Indonesia es una isla y para evitar las inundaciones y también para protegerla de los animales.
So you see that we created a full open project. We used an old technique of Bali, we lifted it up, but we also used these breeze blocks to create a buffer zone between the outside and the inside, where you have the natural material and the wind coming through. Here you see a section of the project. We lifted the whole thing up the ground, so the ground plane is almost free. There's a little bit of space needed for the logistics. We put big gardens in the middle and also the platform where it can be performed. And then we have a ring which has some of the hotel rooms but also has recording studios, a museum, a conference center, all to be used by everybody. And then a rooftop that is partly a bar and a restaurant, partly a swimming pool, but mostly a growing part for food on the roof. So if we go through, we first go from the platform, which is the ground floor. We preserved several trees from the forest that was there. We built around it, and as you can see, we only used these materials that are very familiar to the local people. We used also wood from already cut down trees. And here you see an image of that platform with above the big stairs, and you see that the underside of the stairs is clad with rotan, but not rotan as traditionally was made, but made from recycled plastic. Here you see that better in this view. So you see also that the traditional materials of the island are mixed with materials that we harvested out of the waste, transformed through our waste labs on site into new materials with traditional techniques. So here you see the functionality of the ground floor with the reception, the platform, a restaurant, the drop-off, the beachfront, and also the club that you already saw before. Everything is in open air, covered by the ring itself. So this is the reception area. This is the circular store. Here you are giving a water bottle and a bag out of recycled plastic. Because there is nothing as that you can buy a bottle of water or a bottle of another drink. You all have your own bottle where you can go to tap points or you can get other type of drinks in these bottles. And these bags are to carry around the stuff that you want to take from A to B. This is the restaurant, which is a dome-like shape underneath. And it's a plant-based restaurant. So everything that is grown on site is transformed into food. And it received its first Michelin star 2 months after it was opened. So it also got really recognition that plant-based food can be extremely delicious and extremely beautiful. And here you see the inside of the restaurant. Here you see the mushroom bar. And here you see kind of how it is at night when people dine there. Then we go, yeah, maybe. Go on.
Okay, I know.
So then the first floor, you go up and the ring starts. So there are typical resort program like a spa and a gym. But there's also a conference center, a multifunctional room, a reading room, and recording studios for musicians, and that can simply be used for free. And then you have the big courtyard in which all kinds of events can happen, where food is also grown, and the route to the rooftop. Here you see that courtyard that is fully programmed and which has also these harvest beacons where mainly herbs are planted. And then you go up to the roof, which has the big roof terrace that has a beautiful sunset and where people can really, in a lush environment, spend their time. And here you see from above kind of the area near the beach, but also the growing patches alongside the ring. And here you see a zoom in to that area where you see all the planters and the green roofs. This is an area where people can perform no matter what. There's no program, and you would think, who dares to? But it is very interesting because at least 4 or 5 performances a day are happening here. It can be an artist from the region, it can be a gamelan orchestra. We saw a performance this summer of a Swedish DJ working together with a local Indonesian light artist, and it's all for free. So it's for the people that want to do it, and you can simply go there. And that means also the tourists can go there. And the funny thing is that from the resorts in the surrounding, there was nobody in the resorts anymore. Everybody came here. And here you see one of these performances, which just spontaneously happens, and which is always a collaboration between the people from the area and potentially international ones. And this is during a lazy day, which is also important when you go on holiday, right? Funny, you see here the temple, which is in the middle, preserved of the swimming pool. And here a beautiful view of the sunset. The rooms, there are simply 2 rooms, a small studio and a large studio. This is that hallway which has the breeze blocks with light and wind coming through. And then from there you come into your room, again completely used only local materials, except for the TVs. And you also see that the furniture, for example, here at the right hand side is completely made out of recycled plastic that we harvest on the site, and that we also kind of transform into new items that are sold everywhere. And here you see a picture from the bathroom, which is very simple. And this is the larger studio, which has a bathroom in the middle of the room, and then kind of again all the local materials. And here then an overview of the whole project, which is a growing village, because we recently purchased the resort next to it, which we will transform and make part of the Dessa, and we hope that the Dessa actually is growing. Interesting, the project received the Best Tourism Place award in 2022, which is a big award, which normally goes to big brands. And this is a first project for this client that was never in tourism or hospitality, but just because he wanted to change it, it's now really creating quite upstir. Even more important is that the government of Bali responded to what we have tried to do here, and they have now banned plastic, one-use plastic, on the island, so you cannot buy plastic bottles anymore anywhere. You cannot package food anymore in any packaging that cannot be reused. And so slowly we see a transformation from an island that was really having a lot of waste suddenly to an island that starts responding again to its own tradition and to its own way of life.
Como podemos ver en las imágenes, este es un proyecto esencialmente abierto, que consiste de un anillo sostenido por pilotes, con fuelles entre el interior y el exterior que permiten el paso del viento. La planta baja es completamente libre y consiste de una plataforma, que es la pieza central del proyecto, un espacio flexible para actividades culturales como albergar artistas locales, orquestas, y es completamente libre y de acceso gratuito. Este espacio se comporta como un espacio magnético porque también atrajo visitantes de otros resorts y también conduce a la playa. Por otro lado tenemos una terraza donde hay un bar, un restaurante y una huerta. Bien, El objetivo del resort, como decíamos al principio, es disminuir lo máximo posible la generación de residuos. Y en este sentido, uno de los impactos del proyecto dentro de Indonesia es que el gobierno vedó el uso de plástico en la isla a partir de esta iniciativa, provocando una verdadera transformación.
So, interestingly enough, this is getting a lot of follow-up. So the city of Singapore asked us to make a vision for them, how they can also go to a zero waste situation. And for that, with the client of Bali, we are actually studying currently Singapore with the universities. And we created a small exhibition in the National Design Center, where we explained the journey that we went through with Potato Head Studios in Bali, and we made a blueprint for them for Singapore of how they can also go from now 85% of their waste going to landfill to hopefully zero going to landfill in the future. I will not talk about this project too much, but I will show you simply the images. So here you see in the big atrium how we explain how we reused all the materials in Bali. We explain how we do it there, and we called it Nothing is Possible, so zero waste. And we showed how Bali and the site actually was, what we harvested from that site, also what we made out of it, so all the furniture, the ceilings. We reused the colonial window frames in the facade, and we explained that all in the rotunda with which steps we took over the last 8 years that we were working on the project. And here you see Ronald, the client, explaining to a lot of people in Singapore kind of what that idea was behind it. What is interestingly enough here is that we also show our mistakes, because to get to a system like this, you obviously make a lot of mistakes, and it is not about saying you should do it like this. It is you should try, and therefore mistakes are part of the journey. And then the blueprint for Singapore, which we put in a staircase. So on the top is the 85% waste, and then the different steps they could take to come down to hopefully zero, which is at level 0. And we explained that to them by explaining the different possibilities. We also looked at their waste policies and what you can actually do with that waste. For example, you can gain a lot of energy out of the waste that households create. Okay, the third project I wanted to show you is the Taipei Performing Arts Center. Again, learning from local culture, a project that took us 14 years to create. That's quite a long time, even for us as architects. This is a little model. I always make little models of my projects so that when I travel I can take them with me and I can modify them and think of what we could do. And this is the original model, and maybe it's interesting to memorize the image of this model so that you can compare it to the end result. So the idea I will explain later. This project is about a few elements of local culture. So first, free the ground. This is the Xiling Night Market, which is a very important place in Taiwan. This is a night market where everybody goes after work and goes have stinky tofu, all kinds of other local food, buy jeans, buy phone covers. So this is nightlife, especially popular culture nightlife, for what the government called it low culture. It is a very vibrant place with all kinds of things that I am not used to, you're probably also not used to, but it is an unbelievably energetic place with a lot of things happening. And the government decided to take this away because it was sometimes a bit noisy, because they could not always control the vendors, what they were doing, and they thought it was not a good idea to keep. They thought it was a good idea to put their new theater on this place. So in other words, to replace the low culture of the people which is about the whole citizens, to a place of culture for the elite, a cultural theater that only maybe a few hundred people would go to. And that was the brief that they gave to architects. It was a competition, and there were 144 participants. So they actually asked us to replace that beautiful low culture with the high culture of the theater, simply 3 theaters next to each other with a skin around it and a foyer in the middle. So in other words, take the whole ground away and where it is now public space, where the night market comes at 4 o'clock and leaves at 5 o'clock at night, to build this building and to make it exclusive only when the theater opens in the evening. 143 architects that participated in the competition actually did exactly what the brief asked. So this is the proposal of Zahedid for this competition, and you see the whole energy is gone, the night market is away, you see the 3 halls, and this is then the theater that you would approach. We thought that that was a very stupid idea. So we broke all the rules of the competition. We didn't do what they asked, and we thought we would never ever win. We kept the night market, and we said that culture is, and that energy is so important for the place that you should not take it away. You should actually mix it with the high culture that you're asking for, so that each can learn from each other, and that maybe the people that go to the night market slowly get exposed to theater making, and that also theater making becomes more accessible to other people than just the elite. So we proposed to build the building above the night market and to actually mix these two. And here you see that little model of mine on the place where we kept the ground free. The night market can still come every day and can go in the middle of the night. We have a cube that holds all the surface spaces and circulation spaces, and then the 3 theaters that were asked by the brief hanging from that cube above the night market, so the night market would also be free of rain and also sun in the summertime, because it's quite sunny until 11 o'clock at night in the summer. And here you see now the current situation with the plane completely open, except for a bit of structure and obviously some staircases that come down up into the theater. But for the rest, that whole plane is completely open for the night market to come there in the evening. So you come from the MTR, the underground, and then you come to the plaza that is used for all kinds of things next to the night market. And here you see, for example, an event for the gods in the surroundings. And here you see in that same plane a performance near the puppet theater that is also on that grain plane located, so that children, for example, could also be exposed to theater. Then from that ground plane you walk in underneath the cube in the built environment, but still it's completely free, and at night here there are night stalls that sell food, and then you go up to the first floor. And that is where the theater actually starts. That is from where you go to the 3 theaters, which is the lobby, which is exactly at the same height as the MTR, above the night market. And here you see people gathering and walking in and out. You don't need a ticket to come here. And then you walk to the lobby. This is, by the way, my team in Taiwan that had a very difficult time building this building during pandemic without our support. And then this is the lobby space where people simply now gather. It's more or less a living room on top of the night market. And a lot of people are also here that are not going to the theater at all. There's a little bookstore, there's a coffee bar, and there's even a lot of people that take the food from the night market up to here and go and sit to have dinner.
El Centro de Artes Performativas de Taipei es un proyecto que demoró 14 años y que parte del reconocimiento de un elemento fundamental para la cultura local, que es el mercado de Shilin. Es un mercado que funciona en el emplazamiento donde el gobierno, bajo la premisa del concurso, proponía colocar un nuevo teatro. La propuesta de OMA consiste en 3 teatros rodeados de una piel y un foyer en el medio que cuelgan de un cubo. En este sentido, buscando conservar el mercado y fusionarlo con el nuevo programa del teatro, volviéndolo accesible para todos los ciudadanos. El recorrido lo pudimos ir viendo en las imágenes y los teatros empiezan a partir del primer piso, donde también se genera casi como un living urbano que funciona arriba del mercado y accesible, de acceso libre.
So the second important thing was that we wanted to create something that was more than the sum of its parts. So remember, there were 3 theaters briefed, one of 1,200 seats, which was a grand theater, drama theater, opera house. One from 800 seats, which is a blue box or black box theater, which was completely flexible, where everything should be possible. And then a dance theater for 800 people that was next to those 2. So we were inspired by the night market to not only create these 3 parts, but actually out of this pan comes a beautiful dish that has all kinds of components, and because of these components it's much nicer than what you see here. So what we did is we created this cube of 54 by 54 meters. It's quite big, it's big, quite high rise, and we put these 3 theaters together inside of that cube. So all the stages and backstages are united, and only there where the audience is seated, it's hanging out of that cube. And by doing so, we could actually combine the Grand Theater and the Blue Box Theater together and create a super theater. So we try to be extremely compact, try to unite everything together as a Japanese jigsaw puzzle, but by putting these 2 theaters on the same level, we could actually connect them and create a much larger theater than that was briefed. So here you see a sectional model that we built of that super theater, where people could look from 2 sides and also from the side stages into a performance. And that performance has a stage of 100 meters in length and 40 meters in width. This super theater can host 3,500 people at the same time, and performances can be played here that normally can never happen in a formal theater, and that very often happen in old industrial buildings in the current modern theater. So here you see a drawing of how a performance could actually work over that gigantic space, and where actually people could have their seat. And this was a collage out of the competition that we made. And here you see that space. There are 2 acoustical shutters in between the theaters that open, and when they are closed, the theaters can operate independently, and when they're open, you have this huge super theater looking here from the blue box into the Grand Theater. And here you see how that length actually is. And the interesting thing is that there are of course no theater plays available for a space like this. So theater makers are now writing plays for the super theater. And next week the first performances will happen. Here you see a tryout for that first performance.
La segunda premisa de este proyecto es que el todo es mayor a la suma de sus partes. Consiste de 3 teatros, 2 para 800 personas y 1 para 1500 personas, que se encuentran dentro de un cubo integrados. Y 2 de los teatros pueden conectarse generando un superteatro de una superficie y capacidad mucho mayor a la solicitada en las bases del concurso. Las primeras performances de los teatros comenzarán la semana próxima.
So then the design of the theaters itself, which is actually the only luxurious part of this proposal. So you have already seen in the images, everything is quite infrastructure-like. It's like the night market brought up into the building, and then only when you enter the halls the luxury comes in. So we have the Grand Theatre, the Proscenium Playhouse or the Globe Theatre, and the Multiform Theatre, the Blue Box. And all of them have a different color of blue, but everything in the theatre is the same color of blue. So the floor, the ceiling, the seats, the curtain, the acoustic walls, everything has that blue color. So you enter into a place that has this unity and luxurious feeling. We worked together with Inside Outside and Petra Blast to create this interior, and all the different materials are sourced in the same color. So first the Grand Theatre. From the lobby your ticket is checked, and then you go into a grand staircase. And you go up through stairs and escalators to the theatre. Here you see one of these escalators. And then you enter the theatre, which is a folded plane, so you can walk from all the way down to the top, but also from the top to the bottom. And by default, we created also a window to the city. So daylight can come into the theatre during the day when, for example, they have rehearsals. It has 5 stages, also an understage, which is not under this image, which means we can rotate the props 5 times in 2 minutes. And it has a beautiful curtain. Here you see Remco's and myself this summer in the inspection, because we've done this project fully together. And you see this curtain, which looks boring, an easy curtain, but then when you switch on the light, we will have that image I think later, sorry for that. You will see that then light comes actually through, and the shadows of the actors that are ready behind it you can see. So we have a very large proscenium, and then this folded plane with the daylight windows at the back in the middle, and the VIP boxes on the side. The chairs are also fully designed by us together with Portrana Flau, and they look like a bar, and they fold out of one bar. So here you see how that blue actually creates this unity and luxurious feeling. And this is when the people are inside during a performance. And here you look at that big stage. Here again the curtain, and now I'm sure we're getting the light picture. And there it is. So light actually filters through from the back, and when actors are behind it, you also see them standing there ready for the play. And here a performance that was in this theater. The chairs, as already said, folded outside as a cube. We mocked that all up in our office and tested it. Then the Blue Box Theater, theater of 800 seats, which is fully flexible, all kinds of stage configurations, so the floor can move, and there's a full technical grid in the whole theater. Here you see it can have an end stage, it can have a stage around the people, but it can also have a stage in any location you want. You first go between the outer facade and the inner facade of the theater into the Blue Box, and then you enter this blue, darker, almost jeans color blue theater. And here you see the different chairs and settings ready to be proposed. This is with an end stage configuration, and this is a performance that they had at the opening of the theater. It was a very interesting performance because it was a monk sleeping in the middle of a white sheet, and the guy stayed there for 1.5 hours sleeping. And then after 1.5 hours he stood up, he bowed, and he left. It was very interesting because everybody thought any minute something can happen, right? I wait a little bit more and a little bit more, and 1.5 hours long everybody was waiting for nothing. Also here we designed all the chairs that can be completely folded and disappear in the floor and pop up at other moments. And then the Proscenium Playhouse, which is not connected of the Super Theater, but is a dance theater, which is the Globe. It's the only fully circular theater in the world. And here you see how it works. There's the inner world of the theater, an outer shell, and people move to their seats in between these two skins. It is 800 seats in total, about 600 seats on the floor and 200 in the boxes. So you come from the lobby, you take a big escalator up, you see the ball indicated in the signage, so you go up. Here you enter the escalator, and then you end up underneath the theater ball, in between these skins, in a dark area. And then you move between these two shells to the theater. And where you are in the theater, this is the middle color of blue, you are in this fully round shape, with also round chairs and the boxes at the back. And you are always within 23 meters to the stage. So 800 people in 23 meters from the stage. That's extremely intimate for a big theater like this. So here you see that also the proscenium is round, simply the connection between the ball and the cube. And then you have the stage. And when you look from the stage, this is the view you have as the actor, with the boxes and then the seats on the floor. This is before performance, and this is during performance. It has a very special curtain. It's more a membrane that is at the beginning, and it can move in all kinds of positions. So it can have a central opening, it can have a half opening, it can have a very small opening, and that means that the actors and the theater makers can actually really play with small versus very, very big. And because it's a dance theater, you can imagine sometimes it's very intimate and sometimes it's very, very complex. The chairs are also designed as a globe, and they of course feel very round in the space.
El diseño
I'm
interior...
curious how you're going to translate this all.
Me too. El diseño interior de los teatros es la única parte del proyecto que no es esencialmente infraestructural. Todo el mobiliario es de color azul y deviene de un estudio muy preciso del comportamiento de este color bajo la luz. Para los ensayos también hay ingreso de luz natural. Los teatros poseen un mecanismo tecnológico muy complejo que permite distintas configuraciones espaciales y la audiencia circula perimetralmente entre las pieles del teatro, en ese fuelle.
Okay, let me continue, okay? The next point is access for all. And of course, you understand that when you build something over a night market, and there is the elitist theaters, you want these two things to start mixing. That's not a thing of a second. So you need to introduce the people of the night market to the theater without them having to pay a ticket. So through this building we designed a public loop. You can go in there without a ticket and you go around and you will see all kinds of different things about theater makers. You even go through the Proscenium Dance Theater at the top, can look at the stage behind glass, and then you come down again. So a route for people to be introduced to theater making. So here you see that route through in a diagram, and we'll go in steps past it. So you take another entrance, you go in, and you go through the red escalators. So that escalator goes through this lobby space. Here Ram and me went up, we went all the way to the top. And then you first can take a glance into the technical grid of the Blue Box Theater. So you can see the technicians working during a performance. So this is what you see, and where they are actually working on top of the performance. Then you come into an area where there is a beautiful cafe and restaurant, and you can have something to eat and to drink. You can go outside on top of the Blue Box Theater, where there is a part of the landscape. There's the light well of the light of the lobby, and you can sit there and overlook the city. There's also umbrellas when it's very hot. Then you go through an escalator again, and you can look into, this was such a nice picture during construction, with the construction workers working in it, and I kept it in. You can look into the administrative spaces of the theater. And you can see the green rooms of the actors getting ready. This is also, I can of course not take a picture before performance, but they're all getting ready. And then you go up to the roof, where there's a beautiful roof theater, which overlooks the city, almost above it. And you can also go and sit down for a minute, enjoy it. The music is played through speakers, so you will still hear the performance as well. You cannot shout back, that would be a bit risky. And then from there you go down again to the plaza.
El cuarto punto es la accesibilidad. Empezamos el recorrido en la planta baja y ascendemos por escaleras hacia los teatros, el café y también una terraza. En este recorrido se presentan distintas instancias donde se pueden ver los ensayos y las preparaciones previas de los artistas.
Okay. The next point is the emancipation of production, which is an important point because normally in the theater maker you never see the rehearsal spaces, you never see the administration spaces because they're tucked away. And here we actually put them all in the cube to receive daylight, but to also have contact with the outside world. So here you see a view from the project, and you see the lights behind it, and all these spaces are workspaces behind the glass facade. Here this is the inside during the day, where the performers can actually do their rehearsal exposed to daylight, and of course they can close the curtain if they don't want to. And here you see, for example, one of the performances, the dance performance, getting ready for a play.
El quinto punto es emancipar la producción. Con esto, el estudio pretende visibilizar que hacer teatro es una profesión y mediante dispositivos de transparencia exponer estos ensayos y preparaciones a la ciudad.
Then, for a project like this, you need a lot of innovation and new things to realize it, because of course it is nice to think about it, but how to realize it. And one of the key things in that was that only after the competition the Taipei government said to us, it's an earthquake zone. Oof, we just raised a building of 54 by 54 meters up on a few stilts and hang 3 things that are totally different from it. Can you imagine what happens when there's an earthquake? Yeah, it would do this, eh? So, not a good idea. Oops. So we had to do an invention for the foundations, and we worked together with Arab, and it was actually by incident that we found a way to do it, because Arab said to us, we need to build it on rubber blocks, and it will be, we are not sure if it's going to work, you have to modify the shapes a little bit, and then it would not look like it would today. Then we were in a big workshop, and Rem Koolhaas took a sorcerer of a cup and simply said, but if we would create a sorcerer and put the building on top of the sorcerer and make it possible to roll, would that not work? Because if we take the edge high enough up and it would never tip over the edge, maybe it could come back to its same position. And Arab said, how would that work? But then they went to work and calculated it, and they came up with a ball on oil pressure that is in a casket, and the building is built on the ball, and at the earthquake the ball starts moving in the casket, in the oil pressure, and when the earthquake is back, it comes back to its position. So this building is built on 154 oil pressured balls that are coming back to its position after an earthquake. 3 weeks ago there was a big earthquake in Taiwan, so that was the test. The building is still there. So it worked. And here you see an image of when it was installed. And here you see how big these things are, and you see the plate where the steel structure of the building is actually on top. The next innovation is the facade. So all the facades that are close to the theaters are built of aluminum. Aluminum we harvest from shipyards in Taiwan. Because during the economic crisis 10 years ago, all the shipyards went bankrupt, but there was an enormous amount of aluminum available, which we thought we could simply use so that we would not let it go to waste. And we tried to work with the shipyards how they could make that facade. Also, the glass cube is a very special material because it's self-bearing glass that is curved. So a lot of thinking happening to get this done. And we mocked it up one-on-one on one of the shipyards that went bankrupt to test what we actually could do with the material. This is possible in a low-cost labor country. In the Netherlands, they would laugh at me when I proposed that. So here you see the glass, freestanding glass, 5.4 meters in height with an S-curve so that it can bear its own weight. It's on these shells, and then on top another piece of glass, and on top, and no substructure needed. Which means you get this free curtain of glass in between the inside and the outside without any substructure. And that means that from the inside you get these type of views to the outside. The aluminum, we did all kinds of treatments to them so that they would get damaged, but therefore would be sustainable instead of putting anything on it. We developed with the people of the shipyards a system so that they can treat the aluminum. And then now this is the situation. Some of these sheets are 15.4 meters in length and 3 meters wide. So very, very long and big pieces of aluminum. Then the ball, that was the biggest challenge. So we worked with them to develop a pattern for joints. Of course, heat has an effect on the shell. So compression joints, but also to put big sheets from 750 by 4 meters together into the pattern of the world. We did all kinds of welding tests, and we wanted only a weld that was consistent. And what was really interesting, the shipbuilders did a competition between 12 workers who could make the most consistent weld, and then that one person that won made all the welds on the ball. It took him 4 months. He only speaks Chinese. My Chinese is 60%, so we could communicate a little bit, but the guy was at the opening almost as proud as we were. He was also invited by the mayor, and he could endlessly talk about all the welds in the project. And this is the end result. You can see how consistent it is and what the guy did. And here a closer zoom up of that. And here you see the view to the building with the aluminum and the black aluminum at the back, which has openings for the offices, for the dressing rooms, and for all the other logistical spaces. So privacy related, smaller openings for private spaces, bigger openings for less. And you see that that is also simply the pattern of the functionality in the facade.
Enfrentados al desafío de llevar este proyecto a cabo, tuvieron que desarrollar esencialmente 4 innovaciones arquitectónicas. La primera es en relación a las fundaciones, que fue un diseño conjunto con ARUP. Diseñaron unas fundaciones muy resistentes que son flexibles frente a la actividad sísmica propia del sitio. En segundo lugar, la segunda innovación son las fachadas de aluminio reciclado, también desarrollada junto a, a la empresa constructora que construía barcos. La tercera innovación es en relación al vidrio portante curvo de las fachadas que no requiere ninguna subestructura. Y la cuarta innovación es en relación al teatro esférico, un trabajo muy preciso respecto a las juntas y esta esfera fue construida por una sola persona durante 4 meses.
So the last section, we're almost done, is called Embrace. Because this building was of course an experiment with theater makers, with the people of the night market, with the government, with all the people that go to the theater, but we obviously would not completely know if it would work. We tested it already during construction. So during construction we already got a lot of attention and even won its first award while we were just on the top of the steel structure, where it was the most anticipated building of 2018. It only opened in 2022, but okay. So we did a lot of work, and already on the night market they started selling in 2016 a drawing as a postcard of the future of how it was going to be. And we saw it only after 2.5 years seeing it behind the video screen, because we were not allowed into Taiwan. They had the most strict corona measures that were there. So our team was finishing this while we were behind screens, watching through their cameras on their helmets. It's a very special experience, I can tell you. And this was when we first saw it in August this year, for us to also embrace what we had created in 14 years. The night market itself is back. It's already taking also the spaces underneath the building. And the funny thing is, this stall created something totally new. Namely, this dish. This is not a joke, this is real. So now you can buy on the night market our building. It's not very tasty. It's stinky tofu, and it really stinks, with a 1,000-year rotten egg, an egg that has been preserved for a very long time, and a sauce. I don't know what the sauce is. I tried, but after 2 bites I had enough. But it's quite interesting that the night market people, who first of course were scared that they would lose their space, embraced the building as part of their future. Also, when the night market is there during the night, it's extremely active. We can also project to the different parts of the building, and you see that really an unbelievable amount of people are there during the evening. And then when it is really, really night, this is 5 o'clock, you see that even then the building is used to portray something to the city. And we also found it between all the important buildings of the city, already in the middle, inside of the MTR, as part of the billboard of Taipei. And here you see an image at night that for us was really rewarding, with the light coming from the inside to the outside. And now I want to leave you with a little movie about this project, and then we are done. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. It was long, I know. If there's anybody with a question, please.
Podemos traducirla si hay alguna pregunta en español. Voy con el micrófono.
Hola, buenas noches. Quiero preguntar cómo hace para, siendo un arquitecto de otro país, poder presentar una obra de él, llevarla a otro país con un idioma diferente, con una forma de construir distinta y hacerla parte ahora de su patrimonio como país, ¿no? Que era lo que hablaba él de ser como esa identidad, como que ser parte ya de ese lugar. Claro.
It's a difficult question.
Yeah. Very broad. So he's asking, how do you, wait, he's English, an English speaker.
I'm trying my best. What I tried to ask.
Even better.
Thank you very much for your speech. It was amazing. What I'm trying to ask is about how it's possible to make a project that big in other country, like in other language, in other culture, and make part of the building, making part of the place. You know, like maybe making that building into a
the local
an
context.
icon.
Okay.
Identity, yeah.
What's your name?
Angel.
Okay, Anke. Thank you for your question. Of course, what is really important to understand is that we realize that we are in a very privileged position to be able to work all around the world. But that comes also with a huge responsibility. Because when you can do it in two ways. You can be asked to do something, then you go there, visit once, listen to the client, go back to your offices, design something, bring it back and say, look, we made this for you. Isn't it fantastic? And then a client must be quite daring to say, not so sure about it. So most clients say, great. And then it's built, and then maybe it doesn't work that well. So we at OMA have a total different approach. We have offices around the world so that we understand local cultural ideas in the Americas, in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia and in Australia, all very different. And we invest by our own research, like the countryside, but also transformational architecture we've done a research in. You have seen our Metabolist book, you probably have seen the elements of architecture. So we constantly invest in researching parts of the world that we are thinking that are interesting to work in. Then when we get a project, we actually go there. We put people on the ground, we create local collaborations with local architects, local consultants, other local parties, stakeholders that are involved. For example, in the night market we had local theater makers and the night market people themselves in the team, so that we can really start debating the project and start to learn from actually them. And then with that outsider look, we try to take information out and synthesize a design that actually fits that local context and local demand. Which means spending time there, which means being sincere in what you hear and trying to understand it and trying to translate it. And putting it also into research, testing it. I think I said a few times universities in my presentation. We work a lot with local universities. And we also have architects from all around the world. Our team has more than 80 nationalities, while we are 220 architects. So that means there's only 3 of one nationality, you could say. And that is a really interesting given as well, working with that international team with all these different views to get it done. So it's about being really sincere, really trying to understand, spending time, and which for me means I travel a lot. I'm in different places. It also means that I don't see my family a lot yet. For these type of projects, that investment is very, very important. So you can't do it in an ivory tower in the Netherlands. Then these type of projects will never start existing. Which is part of our belief of how architecture should be. For other offices it might be different. I have no opinion about that, but this is how we do it and how we believe we can create great outcome.
Thank you.
I know it's late, you probably want to go home. Is there one last question?
I want to ask from where do you got that inspiration for your project, your ideas, and also that depends of the place that you are building.
Yeah, it is very much the place that we are building in with the people we are building with and for. So the inspiration comes from visiting, comes from talking, comes from doing research. And I've always been a person that is very curious, so I've never stayed in one place, which is also being quite easy being born in the Netherlands, because it's a tiny country. I think BA is bigger than our country, so it means you have to go out. So I lived all around the world. I studied and lived in Japan. I worked in China, I worked in Africa, I worked in the Middle East. I'm now working from the Netherlands, but traveling the whole globe. So it's also about trying to be curious and interested in other cultures and in other people, and in trying to create something for them rather than for my own ego. And that is, I think, what I should answer to that. Also for every architect, it is important to be curious. Curiosity is the base of everything we do. Then trying to understand, so sincerity is extremely important. Collaboration, because you can never ever do a project like this alone. Forget about it. There's no architect in the world that is great enough to do this on its own. And then spending time, because architecture is time consuming. As I already said, clients want to have it tomorrow. Please tell them it's going to be next month. Use the time to think, use the time to work it through, and then probably something that all of you know, but forget when you're in deadline mode, have an enormous amount of fun. Because our profession is an unbelievable privileged profession. We are shaping the built environment. You can only do that with all these components and also by enjoying it. Because if you don't enjoy it, how can then the people that use the piece of architecture enjoy it? So it's very important to never forget to have an unbelievable amount of fun when you're doing it. Thanks.